Hello and welcome to the Emerging Cricket Podcast, online and on 91.3 Sport FM in Perth. I'm your host Nick Skinner, and today I'm joined by the regular Tim Cutler and a special guest host. Ooh. Regular listeners will notice that your usual host Daniel Beswick isn't here, and that's because he's swamped with work doing a lot of stats for the BBL. So we've drafted in our US correspondent, Nate Hayes, to make his debut on the weekly pod. Nate, nice to hear from you again, and thanks for interrupting your sleep on the other side of the world. How's it going in North Carolina?
It's going good. It's 2:38 right now in the morning. So keep the cliches to a minimum so I don't fall asleep. But yeah, it was nice to hear the EC Deep note when you introduced me there. That was, ooh, I like that.
Now, how do they say debut in North Carolina?
Oh, here we go.
We've debated this.
It's debut.
Oh, so I sound a bit more like Nate.
That's the closest you've been to sounding like someone else. It's fine. But, yes, young Daniel is just snowed under with his BBL stats. So, sorry everyone, you're stuck with us.
Yes, that is, of course, the sound of Tim Cutler. Working hard up in Brisbane. How's it going, Tim?
The insurance world continues.
I bet it does.
It does. A few storms and fires up here over Christmas, but not too many. But after not travelling anywhere for Christmas and then having Australia Day travel plans scuppered after the outbreak of the mutant strain here in Brisbane, it doesn't feel like usual new year of working. It doesn't feel like there's been much of a gap, but, perspective. Going well. Weather's not too bad, not sweating too much, but in saying that, I would sweat in an ice bar. So, I'm comfortable. How are you, Nicholas? Working hard?
Yeah, I'm working hard and I'm sweating quite a lot. It's very hot here in Gosford, very humid, so that's not very fun. But yeah, I'm all right. I've been watching that TV show you recommended, The Investigation, the Danish police procedural, which I've enjoyed. It's restrained storytelling, which I like. It's very methodical, and it like you said, it's very very accurate to what actually happened, and just goes through the whole thing. I was in Denmark when this story was happening, so it was a big deal, and so it's quite interesting to see the kind of the police side of things, because when I was hearing people talking about it, I was like, is this a submarine? This person was on a submarine? What?
No, without getting too nerdy about Nordic noir, I thought it was really well done, and the way they approach certain elements of the story without spoiling it more than you already have, I think makes for some unique TV. Glad you're enjoying it, but I guess you've got you've been turning you've been able to turn the subtitles off and just watching Danish, or are they hard coded?
Oh well, I've been watching with Brooklyn, so I've had them on. They're a bit harder to understand. I've been watching some Danish cartoons on Disney Plus, which are about my level at the moment. So that's
nerd. Yeah, okay. Danish cartoons. Okay, well...
just cartoons dubbed into Danish.
Oh, okay. That's much worse. See, Nate, this is what we normally do. We just talk about, television shows, especially for Ben Stinger, because he loves our TV and movie reviews. What are you watching at the moment, Nate?
I've just been watching... Actually, I've been watching The Mighty Boosh, which is an old show. I guess it's probably 15, 16 years old by now, but I've just been rewatching that because I haven't seen it in a while. It's so silly. So I've been enjoying that goofy thing.
Yeah, that's bringing back some memories. I remember seeing that in high school. It was quite popular at the time.
I'm very speedily Googling it as we speak because I've got no idea what it is.
Sort of like absurd British humor.
Yeah, it's really wacky. They're like a bunch of people work at a zoo, and the head of the zoo doesn't even know what the animals are called, so he's always describing them in a weird way. Like the long walker is what he refers to, but the snake as, things like it's just really bizarre.
Shall we crack on?
Let's.
Yeah, so last weekend, the UAE played against Ireland in an ODI series, in one game. So we'll start with the bad news, and that's that the rest of the series got binned due to a coronavirus outbreak in the UAE camp. Numerous players testing positive in their Abu Dhabi hotel biobubble and then being transferred by the health authorities to a medical quarantine facility. So the Irish and the Emirati boards got together and essentially decided not to play the rest of the series, which is quite understandable. But the good news is that in the first game that was played, the UAE pulled off their first ODI win against Ireland, and only their second win against a full member in ODI cricket. Paul Sterling at the top of the order for Ireland was impressive, scoring a century not out. Andy Balbirnie offered some support early, but got out slogging. There was no real support from the bowlers, and the UAE batsmen Mohammad Usman and Chundangapoil Rizwan both scored centuries and cruised to victory, really. Chasing 270, they got there only 4 wickets down with an over to spare. So very impressive effort from the UAE. Very good batting performance and a sort of a slightly overlooked bowling effort from Rohan Mustafa and Ahmed Raza, who both chipped in with tidy bowling spells. And of course, Raza did the classic of getting his opposite number as skipper, Balbirnie, who was out a bit irresponsible.
Yeah, I only saw the early part of that match. Had other things going on that day, unfortunately, and night. But it's just one of those ones, Paul Sterling, on paper, 131 not out, amazing innings. He scored that at, under strike rate of 89. And I think it's one of those situations where both teams probably didn't know what a good score was on that field and probably thought, 269, is that par, is it not? And then, as you said, they really did cruise, despite being 51 for 3 and maybe thinking a little bit shaky, and considering none of I think the UAE batters average over 30 in ODIs. I might be corrected there, but without Shazad being picked, who's the only other UAE player I think who averages up around 40, but no, did really well. I think you nail on the head there. The key spells there were the 20 overs from the two senior spinners with only 90 runs coming from those 20 overs. But you just look at the other end, and when you mentioned Balbirnie getting out slogging, he 53 off 61. Again, that wasn't that quick either. So it just sounds like although Sterling had anchored at one end, there was nobody at the other end that came in and really got things moving. So that is probably what Ireland will look back at, which cost them. And there as well, some of the key bowlers, both openers for Ireland went it over a run a ball. And we got your key bowlers like that are going for that many. Even Andy McBride, who's normally really miserly, still went for almost 5.5. And when you're defending just over 5.5 and over, that's not enough. So that was telling and really promising from the UAE. And to see, to have their 35-year-old debutant Kashif Dowd come in and bowl quite well as well. I think that's quite promising. Like, who knows how long his body will hold up and he'll be able to play. But, I guess only coming into international cricket at this age, I know he did play some decent cricket back in Pakistan before moving to the UAE, but, he's going to be very handy in this cycle leading up to 2023 at least.
Yeah, the UAE, they have this sort of production line of talent coming through, which is, because of the unique cricketing situation there with the majority of the population being, migrant workers, and the cricket scene reflects that. So there's always these guys coming in and out who you haven't seen before, but then they're just slotting straight in at the top level, and they're looking at home. Even, Mohammad Usman has been around a few years, but he didn't start that long ago. I remember at the 2019, over a year now. At the 2019 global qualifiers for the T20 World Cup, Mohammad Usman put Canada out of the tournament with a fantastic 89 not out. So he's shown his worth a few times, but a lot of these guys have kind of underperformed, or as you said, they're not haven't got great records. But Robin Singh as the new coach has come in, and he's continuing the rebuilding work that Dougie Brown had started. He's got a few of the younger guys like Alishan Sharafu making their debuts as well. So I think there's good signs coming up for the UAE.
How many times is Sterling, the guy that shows up? It just seems to be so common where he has a big score and everybody else kind of just doesn't show up that day.
Yeah, they are quite reliant on him and Balbirnie. Those two, if they get going, like against England, anything's possible. But a lot of the time, if they don't score big, then no one else has been able to stand up.
Yeah, and especially with Kevin O'Brien opening now, which I love that. It's a real positive move. That I think that first started in the T20Is, and that's carried over into the one-day internationals. But I really like the impetus that brings to the innings, and he was looking in great form I think he hit 3 fours in one over from Zahul Khan. It was this really strong breeze for those that didn't watch, blowing across the field, and it seemed that Zahul anyway was really struggling with his consistency, like one short and then 1.5 volley, and O'Brien was just was dining out there. But yeah, well, once he goes, as you said, behind Sterling and Balbirnie, we've seen elements, we've seen flashes from Harry Tector's still a young man earning his stripes, Lorcan Tucker similarly with his talent, but it's almost one of those ones, do you move Kevin O'Brien down the innings for insurance, and at what cost to be down there? I know that had similar situations in teams that were quite thin on like that, and it's tough to know where to put your key bats. But one day Ireland beating England, and just great to see the balance, really, isn't it, in world cricket, to see this type of performance from the UAE and an associate at that.
Yes, and Nate Hayes, filling in for Daniel Beswick, you have some interesting information about the parity cycle that Bez is working on, and another project from one of our friends, Tom Grunshaw, referred to as The Belt. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
All right, so Tom, first of all, thanks to Tom for this content. It must have taken him forever to put this together, but basically he's treating one-day cricket like it's boxing. So if you beat the champion, you become the champion. And so he made a list, a spreadsheet of all the champions and how long they held it, how many days they held it, and how many games. So interestingly, I just kind of looked at it just since 2017, since we're talking about parity here. So since Pakistan held the belt for 213 days from 2017 until 2018, it has changed hands 16 times. So that's 10 different teams that have held the championship. So basically, following right now, where we are right now, following the 2019 World Cup, England held the belt for 219 days. South Africa beat them and they held the belt for 5 days before England won it back. England held the belt for another 177 days until they lost to Ireland. Ireland held the belt for 157 days before losing to UAE. Now UAE won the belt for the very first time. So since 2017, it's changed hands, like I said, 16 times, 4 times to England, twice to New Zealand, twice to Afghanistan, twice to Ireland, once to India, once to Australia, once to South Africa, once to Pakistan, once to Scotland, and once to UAE. Sri Lanka hasn't held the belt since 2014. West Indies hasn't held the belt since 2013. Bangladesh 2011, Zimbabwe 1999, and Kenya 1998. And the longest streak in ODI history is 834 days by the West Indies, September 1973 to December 1975. And in games, 12, once by Pakistan in 2007, 2008, and once by Australia in 2009, 2010.
So to win the belt, you have to beat the reigning champion, but it's also, if you win the World Cup, the belt resets. That's right, isn't it? So every World Cup.
Yeah.
So the belt does move hand to hand, but until the end of that World Cup. So that's just to put that in context as well. But no, we've had a couple of associates with the belt all the way back to 98, wasn't it? When Kenya beat India in that tri-series they hosted. So my question is, if there's going to be a belt, do they have to bring out the belt, and does the captain have to wear it during the game? Does Ahmed Raza now have to wear a leather belt?
With a huge gold oval in it, yeah.
yeah. Look, and if it's anything to do with world cricket, Indian cricket as well, there's going to be a lot of gold. It's going to be a...
And you got to hand it to the umpire when you bowl, too.
Look, I don't want to. Maybe I brought in the facetiousness a little bit earlier there, but that's what I just imagine with the belt. So basically, the UAE are the world champions of world cricket at the moment in men's ODI cricket.
That's right.
I think we can all agree on that. Yeah.
Yeah, we can all agree. So they're the third associate after Kenya, when Scotland beat England, and then that. That's pretty cool. That's impressive. And Mr. Grunshaw, the man of tournament formats, has now brought this as in the belt. So I think once Bez is out of his his BBL basement doing stats, and he looks at the parity cycle again. The problem is when there's this isn't so much a huge upset, I guess, because Ireland are a closely former associate, and they would have played against a number of teams. But when there's an upset like this, it doesn't necessarily reset, because Scotland beating England, will they have played enough teams up around England that have played that England have beat, or that have beat Scotland? But I guess their time in the World Cup would do that for a parity cycle. But no, excellent work. I think we might. It's always almost worthy putting on the website. This, just having the belt updated. It's going to be a new ranking system. It can't be any worse than other ranking systems currently in use.
Yes. In other news relevant to the UAE, we've seen Dougie Brown, former head coach, move to Karachi as the assistant coach at the Karachi Kings franchise in the PSL. He'll be working under Herschel Gibbs, the head coach there, and he's been getting straight to work with the draft taking place on the 10th. Tim, this is a good move for Dougie Brown and bit of a coup, I think, for Karachi, really. He's an excellent coach.
Well, yeah, everything that we saw and had heard of the work that he'd done with the UAE men's team. He was only working with the men's team as opposed to sort of across all the programs, but was great. We brought together that team really well that got torn apart with the fixing scandal, unfortunately. And then even with those players missing, they were just that one game away from the World Cup. So to have done that, to get to that playoff against Scotland, remember Scotland almost didn't make it because they got into a knockout and won it to get there. But that could have been very, very different if Scotland didn't get through that match. And look, I think a lot of the cricketing world was really surprised when he was released. His contract wasn't renewed, or at least he was fired. I think none of it was ever really announced, only that the UAE, on the same day as announcing a new sponsor, it also announced that Robin Singh was coming in as head coach, which, again, to me was a intriguing decision in that, Robin Singh works for 2 months a year with the IPL, with the Mumbai Indians, owns his own academy in the UAE. I guess that's in the UAE, but that might be shuttered as far as we're aware. And, I don't think being an associate head coach these days is a part-time job. It might be, if you go away for 1 or 2 little small T20 gigs. But anyway, by the by, I think this is great news for Dougie, and the PSL's up there in terms of strength and hopefully exposure for him, and who knows what else will come up for him around the world. I know he was working with some academies I think it was in Abu Dhabi, so he was definitely in and around and working with some good players and still there.
Yeah, next we just need PSL to pick some associate players next.
Well, yeah, that was disappointing, wasn't it? With all the players that were, I don't know whether there's an element of reticence to picking players from certain nations that they might not be able to get out of there because of COVID, especially players in the UK if you've got Scottish players. But yeah, to see not one associate, nor Zimbabwean, nor Irish picked, someone like a Paul Sterling, Raza from Zimbabwe, again, I think could be, very valuable in franchise cricket. I don't know if there's some method to the madness or what.
I think it's just the thing of, they're from these lower ranked countries and nobody trusts them to be any good, and it's disappointing. But we've seen it a lot, and it just doesn't seem to be changing very quickly.
Yeah. Oh well. Look, we can scream till the cows come home, I guess. But cometh the days when linked to funding to these countries for them to host these tournaments, they must have reserve spots. But it was great for Afghanistan to see, 6 of their players selected, and a couple of young guys as well coming through. So on one hand, it's not great for emerging cricket, but then from an Afghanistan point of view, that I think the spotlight is very much on that conveyor belt of spinners coming through the Afghanistan domestic scene.
Now, staying in the Persian Gulf, some big news that we've seen this week as well was that Oman is set to host Test cricket, with the academy venue in Al Amarat being accredited by the ICC. This is ahead of Afghanistan hosting Zimbabwe in a Test series. So this is going to be just the 5th time that an associate has hosted a Test match. The other times being Bangladesh, in hosting the Asian Test Championship final in 1999, Ireland's women hosting Pakistan in 2000, the UAE hosting Pakistan and West Indies in 2002, and the Netherlands hosting South Africa's women in 2007. Now, Tim, obviously it's a big step forward for Oman's facilities and a big tick for the great complex that they've got there. But do you think this will help boost the sport in Oman, or is it just going to be another UAE situation where the locals don't really pay attention?
Oh, look, we know Afghanistan and Pakistan before them with their struggles to find hosting solutions, and with Afghanistan being helped out by by India and having facilities provided to them, and none of these things are ever free, but having that provided, if Oman are there and able to present an option that works out financially, then I think Afghanistan will take it. And having high level cricket and then having the chance for their cricketers just trained alongside. Now we've heard Ahmed Raza talk about his time training in the IPL. You're going to see the same thing with Oman's players being able to train with and play against Afghanistan as well, because, you know, all this time with countries in your nation playing against each other, you know, each of these times you'd be trying to get in for a triangular series or a couple of one-days or T20s either way. So if this is going to be a regular thing for Oman, then it'll be great. I know they work very hard in trying to get the game growing locally there, and I think, you know, behind the scenes they've thought very highly of by the ICC development team. And as a, you know, if we're talking about test or full member nations of the future, Oman are a country that gets brought up. You know, they don't have as much pizzazz, if you can put it that way, of a Nepal or a USA, or indeed the population of Nigeria or Brazil or someone, or even Indonesia, to perhaps support something like this. But they've definitely got the infrastructure, and I mean from a business point of view, and some very well-connected people running the game. So this is a huge tick to me for Oman, and the experience that they'll get at the pointy end from a high performance is definitely going to help them.
Yeah, I think this is just another example of why it's great that they all can practice together so easily, that they're all right there amongst each other, so that at a moment's notice that they can do something like this and take full advantage of it. You know, I mean, that's got to be an excellent advantage for them.
Now, looking at these other test matches hosted in associate countries, I think obviously the two that stand out to me are the Ireland-Pakistan women's game, where the Irish beat them by an innings, and the Netherlands versus South Africa game. Now, that Irish game is interesting because we saw Izzy Joyce take 6 of 21 to bowl Pakistan out, and there was obviously the Irish men's test that happened a couple of years ago, and that was a wonderful occasion. But the Irish women had beaten Pakistan at the turn of the century, and it sort of goes to show how, I don't know, underappreciated women's cricket is. And looking at Netherlands playing against South Africa, that's the sort of, in women's cricket that would never happen these days. And it's a real shame that Test cricket for women has become almost exclusively the preserve of England and Australia. Even India, they haven't played a women's Test match for years, so which is quite disappointing. And I know, Nate, you and we were talking about this on just messaging, that it's such a shame that multi-day international cricket in associate cricket has almost vanished, and it's the best format.
Yeah, I don't know how many times me and you or me and Tom have talked about multi-day games. I think about it all the time with the Americas region. Just USA, Canada, just that series by itself has serious potential, especially in my opinion. I would love to see some multi-day games between the two teams, restoring the Audi Cup and just doing it every year. It's the same hemisphere, so you don't have to wait 18 months like England versus Australia. You just alternate every other year. So it's to me, there are little pockets in the country where they could really build a little community that they could have something like that every single year. That would be amazing. Of course, it's expensive and it doesn't fit in with USA's mission right now. But imagine that, and Bermuda too. Just throw that in there. That I would love to see, like a league, a multi-day league between the three teams. It's definitely something that we talk about a lot. It would be fascinating, really. And
you talk about it being expensive. I don't think the Netherlands playing against South Africa cost €1 million or whatever the figure that Ireland has quoted for their test matches. So there are savings to be made, especially in if they hosted it at in Morrisville, for example. It wouldn't necessarily have to cost that much. And especially if it wasn't a test match and they didn't have all the the ICC requirements for that. But yeah. It is disappointing. Just on that Netherlands South Africa game though, it's a bit of a statistical anomaly because the South Africans that they won in the end, but it was arguably one of the most dreary matches in in Test history. They posted 232 in 87 overs for their first innings, which is it's a little on the slow side. But then the Netherlands got to 108. Bowled out from 123.3 overs, which is a run rate of 0.87, and that by some margin is the slowest completed innings in Test history. The next closest being 0.96 run rate when New Zealand was bowled out for 26 in 27 overs by England in 1955, and then the only other time that the run rate was below 1 in Test history was the 2015 blockathon with South Africa against India, where they couldn't quite salvage a draw. So 43 of 297 deliveries for AB de Villiers. That's amateur numbers when you compare it to Violet Vattenberg with 49 of 378 deliveries, or 34 of 117 from Bavuma, well known for being doughty, but Marcia Costa got 29 of 178. So I don't know what was going on. It was probably one of those very damp Dutch wickets, but yeah, the Dutch batters really took their time. South Africa managed to get to 2 for 85 in the second innings, and they skittled South Africa for 50 in the second dig as well. So they couldn't repeat the blockathon, but yeah, it's definitely historical.
How many tests did the Netherlands women play?
I believe that's the only one ever.
Okay.
But it also goes to show that not that long ago, at least in women's cricket, they weren't so precious about Test status, and an associate could play a Test match, and it wasn't ruining the sanctity of Test cricket or whatever is. Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe the attitude where the Netherlands could play South Africa in a Test match, I think maybe we could go back to that. That would be a good move.
Yeah, well, I think you guys mentioned it before about the cost and what did it cost Ireland to run their test? Was it $500,000?
I think it's €1 million.
Yeah, and that's all broadcast and quality of broadcast. What's determined, it has to be at that level, and that's not even including any kind of DRS system. I think all they had that test was the third umpire for runouts and stumpings, as I remember. So that's not even taking that into account. So if you pull that away, is that the sanctity of Test cricket that's required? So I think there's questions to be asked here if countries were able to put it on and able to foot the bill. But I guess we've had this conversation before, haven't we, about the demise of the Intercontinental Cup, which of course was the 8-team first-class tournament for associates. It used to sit as part of, side by side with the World Cricket League, which has now been replaced by the Cricket World Cup League system. I guess it would be a fair question, to almost a review question to the ICC as they look back and see whether they were happy with the development of those, especially those leading associates playing that much white ball cricket rather than first class. Because I think that's, for a lot of those countries, it's the only multi-day cricket, or the most multi-day cricket they would have been playing, with very few countries now having those multi-day comps in the countries. So it's a fair argument. I was surprised that you only mentioned Tom there, Nate, when it's normally Rod that's lauding the multi-day international.
I was just thinking about that. I love his pieces about that, and how what constitutes a test. Should it be 5 days, or should you count other multi-day games? And he's definitely right on there. I think multi-day cricket is great regardless of how many days it is, in my opinion.
Now, still on women's cricket, and the scheduled series between Namibia and Zimbabwe has been called off. That was due to happen between the 11th and the 20th of January in Walvis Bay in Namibia, but unfortunately due to the strict lockdown in Zimbabwe and rising cases in Namibia of the coronavirus, the series has just been they say it's postponed, but there's no forthcoming date as to when it will be played. But in some slightly better news for women's cricket, Shane Dietz is moving to the Netherlands as the women's coach. Now, this comes after his stint in Vanuatu as CEO, but he has had experience coaching women's cricket before, having been in the job for Bangladesh before his time with Vanuatu. And coming from the other side of the world into Vanuatu is Jeremy Bray, who's moving from the Danish head coaching job into Vanuatu. So, Tim, what do you think of these movements?
Well, I think, like you said, people might think that it's a funny move from Shane Dietz, but he actually played in the Netherlands. Geez, I think must be. I'm trying to think how old he is now. He would have been in his mid to late 20s when he was. So he played Sheffield Shield cricket. Don't forget for South Australia, and so he was the overseas pro for a couple of seasons in the Netherlands, and his wife is also Dutch. So I think it worked out really well. I think that had been something they'd been looking at for a while to see what the options were out there. And I think this is a great meeting of the minds for. I think he's done really good things there as player, as a coach, high performance manager, and now as CEO of Vanuatu to move to the Netherlands, which I think we all agree needs a really strong coach there to lead the women's program there, because the opportunities there are huge. And we've talked in the past with Paul van Meekeren about the chance of players sort of swapping sports and coming across to cricket, and even more so if cricket's included in the Olympics. There's going to be a huge opportunity there for the women support there for the Olympic movement there. And then Jeremy Bray, it's one of those names you've seen it somewhere but you're not quite sure. It's because he's been everywhere. He played under 19s for Australia, then moved to Ireland, I'm pretty sure, just as an overseas, and stayed there, ended up playing for Ireland in that famous World Cup where they moved on to the Super 8s.
Yeah, scored a ton in the tie against Zimbabwe.
Yep, and then moved into coaching, where he did some coaching in Ireland before moving to Denmark. So I think it was in the Danish press release, he's returning to the antipodes. It's like, geez, like we're not upside down. That's not the way it works. But anyway, so he's moving back. So look, the Vanuatu, lots of talent, lots of opportunity there. I think what do they say? 5% of the country now play cricket.
Amazing.
So So the numbers that they have, juniors, women and men, so it's great. And then they're on the lookout for their next CEO as well. So who knows, whoever comes in there and the ideas that they bring. But like I said, lots of talent. It's just how they can harness that. And let's not forget, on the men's side, there's that golden ticket that comes out of the East Asia Pacific, with PNG getting a free pass at least to the next global qualifiers, or for their sake, if they get through to the main rounds of the World Cup, they'll go through to the next one. But that means that there's a qualifier spot coming out of East Asia Pacific that would have normally been taken up by PNG as the strongest team in the region. But now when that qualifying tournament comes up in Japan in 2022, early 2020, or maybe late 21, it's probably late 21, but this is going to be a huge event between Vanuatu and Japan, really, for a spot in the global qualifier. So with Jeremy Bray coming in, I'm sure that's going to be front and center of his focus. And of course there's the Challenge League as well. That's important for funding and for opportunity too. So I think this is exciting news, but like anything happens, people start moving around. There's sort of gaps. Denmark are advertising for their high performance manager and head coach, and who knows where that person will come from. After seeing who didn't get the job in Nepal, you never know the names who might come up looking to move to Denmark.
Well, yeah, it would be great if they could scoop up Pubadu now that he's not been claimed by Nepal. I know a lot of people there were pretty hopeful that he would go there, but yeah, I think he would help anybody anywhere he goes. He has a great way of building a team culture and getting everybody on board, and he does it really quickly. So I think any associate could use that. That's a huge part of, I think, associate cricket.
Yeah, Pubadu's the associate super coach. Tim, you mentioned Paul van Meekeren and his interview where he talked about the Olympics. Now, moving on a little bit, Ghana, according to reporting from George Dobell in Cricinfo, is looking to host the African Games in 2023 and include cricket. So the Ghanaian Cricket Association has been touring their facilities to the event organisers, and the report indicates that the response was positive. Now this lines up with what Will Glenwright was talking about when he came on the pod about how they're looking to get multi-sport games happening for cricket, and obviously the African Games in 2023 is a pretty big event on the continent. So having cricket in those games would be a great coup for cricket. And again, it would be, obviously the Olympics is the pinnacle of multi-sport games, but the regional games are worth trying to get into as well.
Absolutely. And at this stage, I think it first broke Cricinfo with George Dobell. I don't know if he listens. I hope he does. He definitely follows us on Twitter, so he must be listening. But yeah, talking about the fact that the ICC along with the Ghana Cricket Association, and the Ghana Ministry of Sports, met with the organisers. So I don't think it sounds like anything is set in stone, but with cricket coming up in the Commonwealth Games in 2022, and with all the talk around 2028 for inclusion in the Olympics in Los Angeles, that can only help these conversations. So, the other two bidders for the African Games were Nigeria and Burkina Faso. So great when you got a couple of cricketing nations there at least. Nigeria, I'm sure, would have been keen as well, considering all the investment they're putting into facilities in the game too. So we can only hope this turns out not to be just a report that it does come true. So, with cricket being back in the Asian Games, Hangzhou in 2022 due to have cricket again, although we haven't seen any news recently about facilities being constructed there. But as far as we're concerned, and as far as we've seen from the Asian Olympic, I should say the Olympic Council of Asia, cricket's going to be back in. So no, this is great news.
And of course, one of the countries that would benefit quite a lot from Olympic inclusion, and indeed it's part of their development plan, is the USA, and especially with 2028 being reportedly the date that cricket and the Olympics allies within the ICC are targeting. Nate, you've been watching the Americans' cricket season over the last year or so. You've watched their minor league cricket exhibition series, and you've got a couple of pieces coming up about what's next. So run us through, the year that was and the year that will be.
Well, of course, there was that famous loss in February to Nepal.
Yes,
where they just got smeared. The whole tour was really rough. That was not a great way to, if you're gonna go a year between games, that's not a great note to leave on. But plenty of things have been happening in the country with cricket, especially domestically. Which is excellent. We talk a lot about franchise cricket versus international cricket, but really, to me, I think obviously a strong domestic system is super important. If you look at all the franchise leagues and how many professional opportunities really are there for cricketers in the world, there really aren't a whole lot. We talked about PSL not drafting any associate players. And it's just the same guys being recycled all the time, for the most part. It's kind of like the haves and have-nots. And so, the big three are kind of a little bit immune to that, more so than the other nations, because they have a very strong domestic product at home. And so the minor league cricket hopes to fill that gap. So that they had their exhibition season this early fall, and we've talked about it a lot. It's famously there were a lot of bloopers with everything, but but it shows some promise, I believe, especially if the owners of the teams stick to the idea, which is give the younger players a lot of chances. We know Ace, who owns Major League Cricket and minor league cricket. We know that they're building the academies around the country, and some new turf wickets did go up around the country. Clubs usually put those in with some guidance from what I've been told, with some guidance from Ace. But a couple of those has sprung up this year. So it wasn't a dead year altogether. And I do think the minor league cricket does show some potential, especially because it gives a measuring stick for people, especially as the turf wickets come in, and as everyone starts playing on turf in what I've been told 2 years time, 2 to 3 years. So once that starts to happen, I think we're going to see a lot of. I think it's going to take off a little bit there. It has every reason to, I believe. But I talked to recently, I'm writing about the U21 players in the minor league cricket. I'm compiling a U21 kind of all-star team. Some of the teams did an excellent job. They're supposed to play a certain number of U21 players. Well, most teams didn't even average that many. But some of the teams really did an excellent job. One of those teams was the East Bay Blazers, with Rusty Theron as the captain of the team. Morrisville, and Irving, Texas were the three top teams in terms of playing the younger players, and they all got great results from the younger players. So that's, we talk a lot about players coming over from other countries here, and the worry is that they're going to take over all the chances, all the good chances. And they that might happen, but in the meantime, talking to Rusty recently on the phone, he's worked a lot with those young players as a coach when they haven't had their games. And, some of the best performers in the league were the U21 players, not just U21 players, but some of the best overall performers in the league were U21 players on that team. And they got a ton of chances. So that sort of thing, I can see some potential there if you do bring these guys in, if they do coach as well as Rusty has. And he, not only that, but he was also an incredibly dominant player in the minor league cricket. But if it goes according to that, then that shows some promise. It is energizing the young players because finally they're on a radar somewhere. They're not just playing to compare notes with their friends. Like you can see what they did. It's right there for you to see, right along everyone else's name. So that's a great thing for the young players. I think it's especially good for the young players, but it's only good for the young players if they mandate a U21 inclusion, and not just inclusion chances. There were some teams they would play a guy and he'd be the token U21 player in the team and he wouldn't bowl or bat. There were teams that literally did that every game. And so I'm hoping that they kind of crack down on that. I think they will in the future, but I didn't understand why it wasn't in an exhibition season, because the games don't matter. Everybody wanted to win every game, but it's an exhibition season. There was no trophy. So I don't know why they didn't already, but we'll see. I think they will do it in the future.
Nate, we hear a lot about people signing for the minor league, talking about Pabudu beforehand, coaching in the minor league. When it's up and running, what will the minor league actually look at? How long will it run? Because I think we hear a lot of talks of these players signing and moving from South Africa and others looking to move to the States. As the sort of base of the ACE pyramid, what would a player be signing on to if they're moving to the States, or indeed if they're a locally contracted player?
Well, what I've heard is the players come over, the ones that have come over from the minor leagues, they're signed to a coaching contract, and they're going to play for their local minor league team wherever they set up shop. And a lot of them are coming here for various reasons. I've been told that, in some cases they were coming over here anyways and they just kind of hooked up. So the idea is that achieving the major league status as a player will be a total meritocracy. That's what I've been told. So what they're saying is that the contract isn't for them to be major league players. It's for them to come over, be coaches, minor league players, help bring things along. So obviously time will tell how that works out. But the big thing is the coaching, and just talking with Rusty Theron and people in California, how at least he's done what looks like a very good job with the kids, and he's worked really hard. And you can see the progress of the players out there. So there is already some of that showing through as working. But this, just because you're a great player or just because you achieve a lot as a player doesn't mean you're going to be a great coach either. So they are here as coaches from what I'm being told, but we will see how that works. Obviously, it'll work out better in some places than others.
And the format of the actual league when it's up and running, how long is it going to run?
Yeah, the league will run the entire summer. The minor league will. The major league itself is scheduled to run at the end of summer, starting in 2022. And I don't know how that's going to compete with CPL or how they're going to plan it around CPL. But that's usually CPL's sweet spot is the Northern Hemisphere summer, late summer. But yeah, the minor league will happen on weekends. It's just a weekend league, and I think that's, if you're going to pay the players, not very much money, you kind of have to do a weekend league so that they can have another job. So yeah, every Saturday and Sunday, and I have some friends in my local league who are like, hey, I got 2 or 3 minor league guys on my club team. I'm like, they're not going to be able to play because they'll be playing every weekend in the minor league. Uh-huh. Literally every single weekend they've got games. So that's what it's going to look like.
So it sounds a bit like a hybrid between grade cricket and sort of a team for like a state, or even like a second 11 for county, where it's not quite pro, only play on the weekends, but they're going to have to be flying around everywhere, aren't they? Because these games aren't regional.
The games will be regional in the regular season,
but within driving distance, or are they all going to be?
There are some places where it's going to be like 7-8 hour drives to your closest team.
Okay.
But in most of the places, the they're close enough to drive within a few hours. The 3 Texas teams are all, I think, within about 4 hours or so of each other. And Morrisville's got a long drive anywhere it goes, that's for sure, because the closest team's about 6 hours away, 7 hours away. So that's them, and Atlanta have kind of a long journey. But for the most part, a lot of them are pretty close together.
Okay, so I'm going to leave that sound like pro grade cricket. That's what it sounds like. Play on the weekends with some really long drives, but really going as teams. And I'm guessing wherever they go, if it's on a weekend, they're going to stay. They're going to have 2 games on a weekend at that one place, are they? And then come back on a Sunday night.
Yep. Yeah. This summer, the way it worked is they would have like they would have like a trilateral or something. I don't think it's going to work that way in the future, but this for the exhibition this time they just squeezed in as many as they could like that, so they'd have double headers and stuff.
Sorry, you talked about the membership portal, because that's stuff that I didn't know.
The membership portal it's going to provide. There was speculation about what it would and wouldn't provide, but it's actually going to provide a little bit of insurance against accidents for the games. So a lot of American leagues or American NGBs do that to get members to sign up. And then they enforce it in the leagues in a lot of cases, like in USA Hockey, for example. There are plenty of rinks that they won't let you play unless you sign up for USA Hockey. So it looks like USA Cricket's doing something similar to that, but I don't think they're going to mandate that you join just yet, at least.
Okay, guys, I think we've more or less reached the end of our time for another week. Thanks a lot to Tim, as always, and to Nate for jumping on at very last minute. Thanks for sharing your time. I think it might be somewhere around 3:30 in the morning now.
Yeah, 3:46.
Oh,
Thank you very much for making the efforts, our good friend.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me. It's I'm definitely fading, but I appreciate it. It's almost bedtime.
And thanks to you for listening to the podcast. Remember to like and review the podcast, or even better, tell a cricket-loving friend about us. And remember that for all the latest on cricket's new world, follow Emerging Cricket on Twitter or Facebook, and check out our website at the 3Ws, emergingcricket.com.